Yes, it's Mark chapter 3, verses 13 to 19 on page 814. Jesus went up on a mountainside and called to him those he wanted, and they came to him. He appointed 12, that they might be with him and that he might send them out to preach, and to have authority to drive out demons. These are the 12 he appointed: Simon, to whom he gave the name Peter, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. To them he gave the name Boanerges, which means sons of thunder. Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him.
If you've been part of church, even just for a while, almost undoubtedly you will go through the sad experience of watching one of your friends walk away from the church. This is all too common of a situation that can happen because of a wide array of reasons and for that individual. And as well, some of these individuals, as they walk away from the church through this whole process, they actually deconstruct their faith completely. The reality is that being part of a church like this also means that we will witness friends who walk away from churches just like this. One such friend of mine did just that. Her reasons for leaving church were that she claimed to be issues of sexism and toxicity, and now I'm not here in a position to know the details of the validity of her concerns. However, what was interesting is she didn't just leave, but she took this season to use social media, as so many people do today, as her diary. So in real time, we got to see her process her hurt, which at times was deeply saddening, and other times just plain ugly. She brought us all along in her disconnection from a particular church and all the problems she had with it. Months later, on her feed, the inevitable post came. A candid photo with her and her friends at a coffee shop, and then a long description of why, in her view, you don't need church. She says, "Look, I have these close friends of mine, and we pray for one another. We encourage one another." See, for her, after months of being away from church, she felt that there was no clear benefit or value that any church could bring to her life. She says, "This is church for me. I don't need a formal service. I don't need a building like this. I don't need those things to have church." She raises an important question. What does a place like this bring that her coffee shop with her friends can't? She makes an important point about the problem with church. Rick, he's got bad breath. Chloe annoys me, and our conversations are always way too long. The church can be at times inconvenient to my own life, and at other times it can be uncomfortable. Wouldn't it just be better if I just spent my time with a few close people that I really like and I have more in common with? Wouldn't that make way more sense? And to be honest, Jordan, if it wasn't for church, would I even spend my time with many of the people that are even in this room? Well, maybe that's precisely the point. We are in a series titled Why Church, and we have spent the last few weeks unpacking what we believe to be some of the greatest challenges people have with places like this. But now we are shifting our gears in our series, and we are now moving to what we believe to be some of the potential benefits of a community like this could be in your life. Why do you need to get up early on a Sunday? Why do you need to come to a place like this? Why do you need to get involved in a small group? And why do you need to serve and give and be a part of church? These are the questions that we'll be answering in the remaining 3 weeks of our series. But today on the docket, we'll be looking at what I believe to be one of the unique values that church brings today. A unique aspect that I think is very rare in our society as a whole, and that's what I would title as diversity. Diversity is a subject that we're going to look at for the rest of our time today, and we're going to look at it in 4 parts. We're going to look at the idea of diversity, the need for diversity, the kinds of diversity, and the way of diversity. The idea, the need, the kinds, and the way. But first up, the idea of diversity. Our first task is to take a moment to unpack how the idea of diversity has become so central to who the church is. You just heard Timo read the teaching text of today found in Mark chapter 3. And in those brief verses, he lists these long lists of Jewish names. And if you've ever read this part of the biography of Jesus, maybe in your Bible reading plan, or maybe you've heard it in places like this, it's been a bit dull or insignificant to you. A list of 12 Jewish men's names, what significance does that have for you and I? Although to the modern ears it might be inconsequential information, for the ancient ears, for the original audience, these lists of names might be some of the most shocking details that the biographer could put in Jesus' entire biography. See, here in this little description, the biographer of Mark is recording how Jesus is picking his executive team. You know, the ones that he's going to be working the closest with, the ones that are going to establish the movement of Christianity. And so this seems to be important, right? But why these 12 disciples? Why these 12 individuals? What's important here? What's happening? Why does Mark think that this list of names is so important that it's found in every single biography of Jesus? What's so important here? Well, 2 reasons, an old reason and a new reason. First, the old reason. At first glance, nothing about Jesus' inner circle of disciples looks like diversity. 12 Jewish men. It looks to be quite monolithic, not diverse. But for Jesus, him choosing these 12 disciples, these 12 Jewish men, had a lot of symbolism to Israel's history. See, any Jew that was listening or seeing who Jesus selected, a Jew would immediately recognize what Jesus was making reference to. See, Israel and its foundation and the history of the nation of people was built on the 12 tribes of Jacob. That's what defined Israel as a nation. If you read the Hebrew scriptures, you would see it show up over and over and over again. So in the same way, by Jesus picking 12 Jewish disciples is communicating that he is creating a new Israel. He's establishing something new, and that Jesus is the fulfillment of Israel, and we have a new history beginning. That's the old reason, but there's a new reason that Jesus picked these 12, and I think it's important for us. There's certainly an old reason, but something new he was creating. In many ways, 12 men from one particular ethnicity might not sound diverse, but it was who Jesus chose that makes a statement of what this new kingdom reality is going to look like. Jesus is making it clear for all those who are observing this Messiah, this rabbi, what kind of kingdom is Jesus building? And by who he selects, who he picks, he's making it crystal clear how this new kingdom will look. Why these 12 men? What's significant about them? Well, let me list them for you. You heard them from Timo, but let me list them again. There's Peter, James, and John, Thaddeus, Simon, and Thomas, Judas, Matthew, and Andrew, Bartholomew, great name. We should bring that one back. Bartholomew, Philip, and James. Now, these names have become part of history. They have become respectable names. Many of you in this room probably maybe even share one of these names. And these are the names that we name our children. These are names that have become part of history, but despite that, this list of names would be some of the most controversial, unlikely group of people that you could form 12 disciples together. Let me just highlight a few of them. First, Peter, James, and John, they were fishermen. Now, fishermen were one of the lowest society professions that you could have, lower class in the ancient world. And you would think if Jesus is picking his inner circle, if he's making the new Israel, the new foundation, well, wouldn't he pick some of the Jewish leadership or the religious establishment? But no, he picks some of the lowest class individuals that he could find. Thomas is in his list. Thomas is now famous as being the one who doubted Jesus' resurrection, but if you read Thomas throughout the biographies, he is always doubting everything that's happening. He is a natural skeptic. He is unsure of Jesus at every turn that he shows up. It's always him showing up with skepticism. Then you have Simon. Simon here, Mark actually includes the zealot. And for us, that means not very much, but the zealot was a group, a sect of Judaism in the first century, which was this nationalistic militia group. In other words, this sect of Judaism did not like the Romans were there occupying their country and their nation, and so they saw themselves as their responsibility, their divine will to go out and to rid themselves of this Roman oppression. So zealots would go into busy areas, into crowds, into markets with a knife, and they simply would go in, slip in, and cut the throat of a Roman citizen and slip right back out again. Scholars describe zealots as the same as modern-day terrorists. That's who they were. This is who Jesus picked as his inner 12. But what's even more shocking is who else he picked. He picked Simon the Zealot, then the next line, Matthew the tax collector. Well, Matthew was now seen as the one who given up his brothers and sisters, given up his own people to serve the oppressor. He was the image of the oppression. He was the one that was collecting taxes from his own people. He was the one that serves the Romans. He was the face of the Roman Empire. And then you have Simon. These two cannot be two ideological different people, but Jesus brought them together in this inner group he has. And then finally, you have Judas. A name that's not as common to name kids today, I've found. Judas is famous. Most people in our society know Judas the tax collector. Judas is the one who betrayed Jesus. But when Mark was writing his biography, it was probably decades after the fact that this all happened, and so Mark had time. Mark had time to remove Judas from the narrative. Why keep Judas in? He is a blemish on the history of the church. Why do we need to keep him there? See, many scholars think that Mark was trying to communicate something. He was trying to communicate that Jesus intentionally choosing Judas as part of his inner circle is making a point that even those closest to Jesus can have imperfections. Or say it the other way, imperfection will be found in this community. These are the 12 disciples that Jesus chose. These are the 12 disciples that he brought together. There could not be a more diverse group of people than these 12. It's why William Barclay, the New Testament scholar, says this: Christianity began by insisting that the most diverse people should live together, and by enabling them to do so because they were all living with Jesus. See, Jesus chose this inner circle of 12, but then Jesus also interacted with a diverse group of people. He invited people from diverse backgrounds. He had men and women to be his disciples, which was uncommon in the ancient world. He interacted with different ethnicities, which was uncommon in the ancient world. He had people from different social classes, which was uncommon in the ancient world. And he had people who held different views of the world, all rubbing shoulders with him, all coming together, all forming this new community known as the Way. And so Jesus set out into motion for us what this community would look like. So what Jesus set into motion became one of the key markers of the early church. Diversity. Diversity. And however, there was different moments that the early church really doubted whether this could actually work. That Jesus' vision of a diverse community, could it actually ever happen? And at different moments in the early church, there was a push to more uniform community. Let's let the Gentiles do their things, non-Jews, and let's us Jews do our own thing. Let's create these separations. Let's enforce these divisions of society as great. This is just too much work. But the church, over and over again, continued to press and fight for diversity, saying this is at the heart of who Jesus is. And this is at the heart of the community that he has built. And so diversity has always been part of the church, which leads Richard Bachman to state about the church today, present tense, quote, almost certainly Christianity exhibits more cultural diversity than any other religion. And that must say something about it. Diversity is the heart of what makes church church. So that's the idea of diversity, but what's the need for diversity? Or to say it another way, why is this so needed today? Why is diversity so important in our cultural moment? Well, we currently live in a cultural moment where many societal streams are coming together all at once that are making our society less and less diverse. There's much I could say about this, but let me just focus on two realities, two streams that are coming together that's creating a more monolithic culture than a diverse one. The first one is what I would call echo chambers. We can perhaps more easily than ever before get into echo chambers where all we hear is the same perspective over and over again. We hear our own voice, in other words. We can consume only one opinion or one issue of just looking at the way of the world. This is probably mostly because research has demonstrated that our algorithms, the algorithm that is formed based on what you search, scroll, or click, will customize your information for you. In other words, the algorithm's quite smart. They know what you like, or what at least you like at one moment, and so they'll continue to feed you the same thing, meaning that you will just constantly get the same perspective over and over again. Recently, a friend of mine sent me a video of a politician that he wanted my opinion on what he was saying, so I clicked the link and I opened on YouTube. I watched the video, and then right after the video, YouTube does this. They have another video that they suggest for you that's similar to the one you just watched, and so it was only 3 minutes, so then I clicked on that one. I watched that video, and next time I was on YouTube for something else, I noticed that in my suggested videos was the same politician, and one of the titles of those things that said, "The moment that shocked everyone." And I just had to know what the moment was that shocked everyone. It was only 3 minutes. I could not afford to miss that, so I clicked on the moment that shocked everyone. And so after only 3 or 4 of these videos by this one politician, now every time you go into my YouTube page on the suggested videos is always by this particular politician and his views. See, this is problematic because most of us consume our information today from online sources and not real people. Most of us, our understanding of the world is based on what we read online rather than what we, in conversations we have engaging with people. And so now imagine you spend hours online every day and the algorithm continues to format and create a specific narrative to you. Over time, you become more and more in your own echo chamber, meaning that your view of the world is becoming more and more formed by an echo chamber. Second stream that's coming at the same time as this reality is what I would call isolation. We live in Vancouver. In fact, in the Lower Mainland, there is 3 million people that live here. 3 million people live here, but however, most of us don't know more than 2 neighbors on our street or more than 2 neighbors in our buildings. Even places that were intentionally designed to create this kind of cross-pollination of ideas are less and less like that today. I know many students that go to different universities here in the city, and I talk to them about their experience, and many of them, they simply just go to their class and then they return home. Not to mention that a lot of their courses now are online, and they don't actually even engage with other students except those mandatory group projects, which are the worst, but when they have to do those things. So even a university which is designed to have different opinions and different ideas from different students and different perspectives, there's less and less of conversation and relationships that are formed in those spaces. Even workplaces have become more and more remote, especially since COVID. Lots of us have hybrid work styles, and many of us work completely remote. And I don't know about you, but it's really awkward to set up a Zoom meeting just to talk about the weekend. And so most times we set up meetings with colleagues is just to talk about work. But those natural moments that happen in the office when you're getting ready or unpacking your bag or eating your lunch for 10 minutes and the conversation about the weekend or tell me about your family or those different things, they don't happen as naturally, as organic online as they do in person. All of this means that there are fewer and fewer places today in society for you to be confronted with people who sound different than you, who look different than you, and live different from you, and actually have real relationships with them. See, the church, in many ways, is uniquely positioned as a diverse community. In a cultural moment when so many currents are pushing isolation, echo chambers, and monolithic communities, the church presents itself as a unique display of diversity. So there's a need that we have today in our society as large, but what is the kinds of diversity that I'm talking about? What's the kinds that I mean? What do you exactly mean, Jordan, when you say diversity? Well, I mean, what I'm speaking about is diversity in gender, diversity in age and socioeconomic position and ethnicity and spiritual experience and politics and all the rest. Diversity means all of these things. But let me just take a moment to focus on a few that I think is really specific and vital for the church, and I actually think the church can create a pathway for a society as a whole. So a few areas of diversity that I want to just pinpoint here. Diversity of age. I was having a conversation. Amy and I were at a family gathering, and we were sitting outside on those lawn chairs watching the kids play outside, and my sister-in-law leaned over to us, and she asked Amy or me, I can't remember, do your kids have any seniors in their life? She's like, besides your grandparents, is there any seniors that your kids interacted with on a regular basis? And I was thinking about that. I'm like, well, yeah, at church, every week. They have interactions, but then I was thinking outside of church, there's not really any interaction with seniors that my kids have on a semi-regular basis. And she was lamenting that, she realized that her kids actually never spend any time with seniors. That the only seniors that her kids know are her grandparents that come over. See, we get asked a lot in this place what kind of demographic our church is. When we're talking about our church to different people, they're always asking, what kind of demographic are you? And we always find that question hard to answer. Because a lot of times they're asking, what kind of age group is it? But we have a wide range of ages. We are not predominantly one age group in our church. And we think that's great. We think that creates a healthy community. Let me just take a couple minutes to explain why I think the diversity of the generation creates the soil that builds healthy community here. A couple things. First, we are building a church for the next generation. Our focus is the next generation. Because what are we building this for if it wasn't for that? Let me say it another way. What are we putting all of our hours of time and energy and resources and money into this place for just to die with this generation? See, the legacy for us, church, the legacy for all of us is that this place here, decades from now, has a new generations that are singing and claiming about the beautiful transformation work that Jesus has in their life. And so we want to create a place that younger people feel that they're invited in to speak into the decisions and how we structure and form things. And so Amy and I have several people that are younger than us on our leadership team. And some of you are really gracious and you think that we are young, but we're not young. We're getting old. I know we're all getting old, but we have a minivan and 3 kids. We're not young anymore. And you get older a lot quicker than you realize. And so we constantly want to have younger voices communicating to how they see church, how they experience Jesus. And sometimes their ideas would be completely different and wild sometimes than what we would do, but we want to constantly lean into that because we want to create a place where the next generation could identify what's happening here. So we will continue to create spaces for kids and for teens and young adults, and we know that the decisions that they make at those stages of life, statistically the decisions that kids make and teenagers and young adults make, the decisions they make about who Jesus is and spirituality will have significant effect on the trajectory of their life. And so we are building a church for the next generation. And at the same time, we honor those who have gone before us. We honor them. And one of the primary ways that we honor them is by listening to them, by gleaning from their wisdom, because they have decades in the book now of following Jesus. We have a team of students that comes, part of their ministry. They come from a ministry school in Abbotsford, and they drive out here every week to help out. They're not here. They're in Uganda or somewhere. They're not here today. They've taken the summer break off. But they're like 18, 19, right out of high school, wide-eyed, the world is big. They're lovely. We love having them. And they come and experience our church and be a part of it and serve in different areas. And so at the end of the semester, Amy and I had them over for brunch, and boy, could they eat a lot of French toast. I was surprised by the quantity. Anyways, so they all came over, we fed them, and then we said they have to answer a couple questions because we fed them. And one question we said, what was the most impactful moment for you here at Forest City? And I was kind of hoping that they were going to say, Jordan, when you did that talk, in prayer. But what was really surprising to me is that a couple of them talked about the multi-generation that we have here. And a couple of them actually said that some of the most impactful moments that they had in the entire year was talking to a senior in our church and hearing about his perspective and him asking questions about their life and the different things like that. They said that was the most impactful moment of their life, of their time here at Forest City. See, it's my deep conviction is that every generation can learn from one another. But that can't happen unless we're all in the same room. We're all in proximity of one another. So diversity of age. Secondly, diversity of ethnicity. And to kind of outline the significance of this, I have a map for you today. I hope this is less blurry than the last time I did a map of the world, but we're hoping if we could put that map up that I have, great, this is it. That's not bad, eh? I used something, anyways, doesn't matter. So I want to talk a little bit about how Christianity has spread and how religions have spread, and just kind of by that illustrate the significance of the cultural diversity of Christianity. Islam began in Saudi Arabia. That's where it originated. If you could go to the next slide. And this is how it spread over its years. And so 90% of all Muslims live in a band from Southeast Asia to the Middle East to Northern Africa. This was where 90% of Muslims live in this area where it started. Hinduism, next slide, started over here in India. And if you want to go next slide from that, and it's spread predominantly to be in India. 95% of Hindus live in India or close proximity to that. Buddhism also started in India, right? And if you go next slide, and it's spread here to predominantly to be in East Asia, where 88% of Buddhists now live in this area. So all three of these have pretty much stayed geographically to where they originate. The vast majority are still in that geographical place. Now let's go to Christianity. So Christianity began in Jerusalem. Surprise if you didn't know that, that's where it started. Anyways, now let's see where it spread. So this is Christianity. So 25% of Christians are in Europe. Another 25% are in Central South America. 22% are in Africa, which has predominantly been the last century where the most of that growth has happened. 15% are in Asia, but that is fastly growing, and I think it might outpace Africa soon. And then 12% are in North America. So Christianity has spread across the globe, spread across cultural and language and different ethnic lines. And see, many people talk about Christianity as predominantly being a Western religion, but only 12% plus Europe at 25%, roughly a third, if that, are in actually Western part of the world. So in so many ways, Christianity has become a world religion. It has crossed so many of those lines where many of the major religions are culturally bound. They're geographically bound to where they originate, and so much of it is based in culture. Christianity always seems to have a cultural nuance that moves into different cultures like that. See, we believe the church is to be a glimpse of heaven. And based on this data, well, heaven will be one of the most diverse places there is. See, of course, the church has been part of perpetuating racism and division, and we have taken time in this series to discuss that in detail, and I don't want to skip that. But when the church is done right, It should be the representation of the community in which it is positioned. And for us, this is just not some tokenism. This is not something that we can say and we put on the wall and we can tell people, but it's really important to us because we want to learn from our brothers and sisters. And based on this data and what we know of Christianity spread, the majority of our brothers and sisters live all across the world. And so we want to learn about how their lives differ and how they experience Jesus different and how their faith is expressed differently than our predominant culture. So many of our recent challenges in society today have been around race. And so much of the social discourse on the subject has illuminated for many of us that there's a lot of learning that we need to have around this. But it's my belief that learning happens best in relationship with others. And how can relationships happen when your community looks just like you? How can you build relationships when you don't have community that's experienced of diversity with different people? See, I learned so much about following Jesus by talking to individuals that have a diverse background than myself. I've had such beautiful and rich conversations with individuals who grew up in a Chinese immigrant family here in Vancouver and how they experienced and found Jesus and what life looked like for them. I've had great conversations and times of prayer with my African friends who want to hold my hand and pray with such vigor and stamina that I just feel like I met Jesus there for the first time. Or I have these important conversations with friends from South America where they talk about community and spending so much time relationally and living in relational ways that just rubs my individualistic North American culture all the wrong ways. But I'm learning so much about the diversity and the mosaic of the church. Our diversity and our ethnicity is what creates in us the beautifulness of the full body, the full expression of who the church is today. Finally, lastly, the diversity of spiritual journeys. We, at Forest City, we welcome individuals at various stages of their spiritual journey. But why is this so important for us? Why is the diversity of spiritual experience so important? Well, I think it's because when you get different people of different spiritual backgrounds and experience, they challenge one another in important ways. See, I believe faith is best done when we wrestle with our faith. Those who have followed Jesus for a while know that they need to wrestle and think deeply about their faith to have a robust faith. But for many individuals who grow up in faith, they've grown up in communities where their faith has never been challenged or questioned, and they simply inherit their faith, and they don't always make it their own. And the same is with skeptical people that live in more skeptical communities that would define themselves as skeptics. They live in communities and places where there is not a different perspective, and doubt then becomes a common assumption. The result is you have individuals of faith who are not questioning their faith in those, and then you have individuals with doubts who are not questioning their doubts. And this is problematic. Timothy Keller, he kind of unpacks this for us. He says this, quote, "Both doubters and believers have a moral and intellectual responsibility to examine their doubts and beliefs." In other words, it becomes problematic for what you believe if you don't ever spend time with people that think differently than you. Keller goes on to say that if all you have is a bunch of skeptics together commemorating or talking about their doubts, and all you have is a bunch of people, believers together, and not questioning their beliefs or their doubts, then you have these two communities that don't see the benefit of spending time together. But imagine, he says, creating a community where both doubt and faith are questioned, where these two groups of people come together and to form this learning community where they challenge one another, where they give different perspectives, and both doubt and faith are questioned. Our dream is to create such a community, one where skeptics are truly welcome to come and ask their questions. In fact, there are many people who are part of this community that are still unsure what they think about Jesus. And we allow space for individuals to explore the claims of Jesus, and so much of what we do is to create space for that. That's why we continue to run and commit time and energy and resources to Alpha, which is really designed as a place just to have conversations and ask questions about who Jesus is. Our small groups are designed in such a way to facilitate people to ask the questions, to push back, to wrestle with things. The type of series that we do is to facilitate curiosity and questions. Our language on the stage and how we communicate, it's all intentional to create a welcome environment for people to explore their doubt and their faith. See, we believe the path forward is from us learning from one another. That being said, I want to be clear that our desire for you, if you're a skeptic here today, we don't want to create this sort of bait and switch for you. We believe that at our core that following Jesus is the best way to experience the life here on earth. And therefore, you are always welcome. Even if you never commit to following Jesus, you're always welcome here. But I want to be clear, our hope for you is that you would discover Jesus the same way that we have. So back to my friend who walked away from the church and called her morning coffee visit the same thing as what happens in this space. In my opinion, here's what I believe to be one of the biggest challenges with this. It's great that you drink your oat milk latte with your 3 or 4 close friends and have conversation on a Sunday morning, but it lacks diversity. It's interesting, the photos she posted, the group of people all looked like her. They all roughly were the same economic position as her. They all think similarly to her. They all have the same gender and age as her. And I don't fault her. Often our self-selection of people we spend time with lacks diversity. If I was to pick a small group of people and gather together, they probably would be similar to me in many different ways. But don't hear what I'm not saying. Yes, you need places like this. You do. They're valuable. You need places to engage with smaller groups of people. But the church is a place where you are confronted with people who are different from you. Finally and lastly, the way of diversity. Okay, what's the application for us? How do we continue to be a diverse community? How do we embrace this? Well, let me give you an illustration. To help kind of cement this idea. Back in the day, when I used to go to the gym, I did do that at one point in my life. You know these places, gyms? Maybe you've heard of them. They have these small little spaces with mirrors everywhere where you don't talk to one another, but you do these awkward body movements and all in the same space. That's what a gym is if you're not sure, if you've never been to one. But when I used to go to the gym and I would do my movements and people do their movements and we're working out together and we don't talk to one another, I observed and noticed that there's 2 types of people that go to the gym. The first type of person, they go to the gym to work out and to do the purpose of going to the gym. But then there's a second type of people that go to the gym to say that they went to the gym. If you go to gyms, you know this. So there's people that go to the gym to work out. They have a schedule. They do it. They get sweaty and do the whole thing, and then they leave. And then there's the second group of people that say they went to the gym. So they come, they take a while, and then they do like their first rep or whatever this workout thing is. And then after they do that for a little bit, you know, they'll take a 10-minute break because that was strenuous, right? And then they'll do something else, you know, some other workout thing. And then after they do that, they'll like maybe go on their phone for 5 minutes. They'll fill up their water bottle again. They just take their time. They go through organizing their Spotify playlists, you know. They're still there for an hour. They take the whole time that someone else does, but they take their time. They're never in a rush. They there's long breaks in between that, and they seem to do everything else but actually working out. Similarly, you can come to a place like this and be surrounded by diversity but never experience it. See, diversity means that you have to step out. It means you have to meet somebody new. It means that if you're young, it involves talking to someone that's older. It means that if you're single, it's meeting someone who's married and maybe has a family. If you've been following Jesus for a long time, it's connecting with someone who's on the fence and is unsure about the whole thing. See, the simple application for you and I is to meet someone different from you. And today's Name Tag Sunday. So we've made it easier than perhaps any other Sunday for you to connect with someone who is different from you. The beauty of the diversity of this community happens best when we engage with it. I'm inviting the keys to come up, and I'm going to close with this. About a year ago, a little bit less than that, I met Craig and Cade. Cade played electric guitar this morning. Craig and Cade, say that really fast lots of times. They came from India, and they just happened to find our church, and they came in and connected with them over this last semester. And Craig, on his last week of being in Canada, thought this was the week that he wanted to connect with me. He's like, I really want to connect. I'm like, awesome, but I'm leaving in a week, so we should do this. So I was like, okay, let's make it happen. And so I was connecting with Craig, and I was asking him about his experience here, and he just started talking about a lot of anxiety he had coming to Canada. He said, I've heard lots of stories of Canada. And I've heard like being someone from India in Canada, you can experience a lot of racism. I've never left my home before. I've never left India. I've never been in a new place. I was really nervous. I was really scared going to school and new routines. There's a lot of expectations here. My parents are paying a lot of money for me to be here to do school. Like, I could hear him communicate about the weight on his shoulders. And then he told me how he came to Forest City. He's like, I came to Forest City on a Sunday, and it's different than how we do church in India. But then I looked around the room, and he's like, man, there's just a diverse group of people here. And he said something to me. He's like, I felt at ease because I knew that in this room was a wide array of experiences, a wide array of people, and that there wasn't this monolithic thing that I was stepping into, that I was clearly the outsider. I felt as one of this place. And my question for you and the one that I wrestle with is who cares about the Craigs of the world? Imagine if this place wasn't here. Imagine if we weren't here. Imagine if we didn't open our doors on a Sunday. Where would Craig find a place of belonging? He says, like, I didn't really connect with many people in my school, but church became the place. This became the place where I looked forward to. This became the place where I became known. This became the place where I built relationships. See, it's our joy, it's our opportunity to become a place that welcomes people from a diverse background. And we believe that this room, well, it speaks before we ever do. This room and who's in this room and who's sitting here and what they believe and what they think and what they look like and how much money they make and what's their career and all those different things, they speak louder than any song or any prayer or any sermon that we will ever preach. If you're able, I invite you to stand with me this morning. The team's coming, and we're gonna wrap up. The prayer team is coming as well, and as always, it's our joy every Sunday to partner with you in prayer. If there's something that you need prayer for today, we love to pray with you. But as they come, and before we sing our last song, can I pray for you? Father, we are so thankful for this community. And as we're taking time in this series to look at the reasons of why church in the first place, may we be reminded that sometimes parts of this community that are different from us, the parts of this community that maybe sometimes makes us feel uncomfortable or just different than how we would do things or how we think, those might be some of the most beautiful aspects of what makes this community so rich. So Jesus, I just pray for this community, for my brothers and sisters, for those who call this place home. May we make a commitment to not lean into what's easy of uniformity, but may we continually fight for diversity. May we continue to engage people that are different than us, that think different than us, that look different than us. May we be the church. May we welcome people from a wide array of backgrounds. May we be heaven on earth. So Holy Spirit, this is not just simply some tokenism for us. This is not even just simply a value, but Lord, may we live this. This will be hard work. So Lord, we need your grace. We need your Spirit to meet us in our lack. Father, may you humble us, Holy Spirit, would you just fill us with compassion, love, to love those that are different than us. We ask this in your beautiful name. Amen. Let's sing together.